Right now, without thinking about it, you are breathing. Your chest rises. Your chest falls. You have done this roughly 20,000 times today alone. You have done it in your sleep, in the middle of arguments, underwater, and at the top of mountains, without once stopping to wonder if you were doing it right. But what if you weren't? What if the single act your body performs more than any other, the thing keeping you alive at this exact second, has been slightly, quietly, profoundly wrong for most of your life? That question used to sound absurd. Breathing is automatic. Breathing is instinct. Breathing is the one thing your body handles without you. Except scientists who have spent decades measuring airways, blood gases, and the biochemistry of respiration have started arriving at an uncomfortable conclusion. The way most modern humans breathe is not the way the human body was built to breathe. And the gap between those two things is costing you more than you know. To understand why, you have to go back. Not 100 years. Not 1,000. Much further than that. Your body is roughly 300,000 years old. The architecture inside your chest, your nasal passages, the shape of your diaphragm, the chemistry of your blood, all of it was designed, if you can call it that, by millions of years of pressure and survival. Early humans breathed through their noses. Every breath, every night, every run across a savanna. The nose is not just a decoration on the front of your face. It is a sophisticated air processing machine. It filters particles. It adds moisture. It regulates temperature. It produces something called nitric oxide, a molecule your lungs use to dilate blood vessels and absorb oxygen more efficiently. Every breath through your nose delivers a small, automatic dose of something your cells need. Your mouth was for eating, for talking, for making sounds that held your group together, not for breathing. Then something happened. James Nestor spent years interviewing researchers, divers, and pulmonologists for his book Breath, published in 2020. One of the most striking experiments he describes was conducted at Stanford University, where researchers temporarily blocked subjects' nasal passages with silicone plugs for 10 days, forcing them to breathe entirely through their mouths. The results were jarring. Sleep quality collapsed. Snoring appeared in subjects who had never snored before. Blood pressure rose. Cognitive function dipped. The subjects' bodies showed measurable signs of stress, all from 2 weeks of breathing the wrong way. When the plugs were removed and nasal breathing resumed, every single marker reversed. 10 days. That is all it took to observe the difference. But here is the stranger part. You are not doing this for 10 days. You are doing some version of it every time you sleep with your mouth open, every time you breathe rapidly through your mouth during stress, every time you sit hunched at a screen and let your breath become shallow and fast and barely reaching the bottom of your lungs. You have probably been doing it for years. Researchers like Patrick McEwen, whose work on what he calls functional breathing has been cited by practitioners from sports medicine to sleep therapy, describe a phenomenon called chronic hyperventilation. Not the dramatic kind, not the paper bag kind. The quiet kind. Breathing too much air, too fast, too shallow, so consistently that your body recalibrates around it. Here is where it gets genuinely strange. The trigger that tells your brain to breathe is not actually a lack of oxygen. Your blood is almost always carrying enough oxygen. The trigger is carbon dioxide. When carbon dioxide in your blood rises past a certain threshold, your brain says breathe. Carbon dioxide is not just a waste product. It plays a direct role in releasing oxygen from your red blood cells into your tissues. This is called the Bohr Effect, named after the Danish physiologist Christian Bohr, who described it in 1904. Without sufficient carbon dioxide, oxygen stays bound to your blood cells rather than being released where you need it. So here is the paradox. If you breathe faster, you take in more oxygen. But you also flush out carbon dioxide. And without carbon dioxide, your body cannot use the oxygen you just inhaled as efficiently. breathing more can actually deliver less. The body responds to this by doing what bodies do, it adapts. Your chemoreceptors, the sensors in your brainstem that detect carbon dioxide levels, reset their threshold downward. Now your brain starts firing the breathe signal at lower and lower carbon dioxide concentrations. You become, in a measurable physiological sense, intolerant of carbon dioxide. Intolerant of the very molecule that controls how well oxygen reaches your cells. And what does that feel like? It feels like anxiety. It feels like low-level fatigue that never fully lifts. It feels like waking up tired even after 8 hours of sleep. It feels like difficulty concentrating, a mild persistent tension in your chest, moments of breathlessness when nothing is physically wrong. It feels, in other words, like a lot of things people assume are just modern life. Researcher Konstantin Buteyko, a Soviet-era physician who devoted his career to studying breathing dysfunction, believed that correcting breathing patterns could address conditions ranging from asthma to anxiety to hypertension. His methods were dismissed for decades in the West. They are now the subject of clinical trials. A 2014 study published in the journal Chest found that breathing retraining significantly improved quality of life and reduced symptoms in patients with chronic respiratory conditions. A 2019 paper in the Journal of Clinical Medicine found links between dysfunctional breathing and panic disorder that went beyond simple correlation. The science is not complete. Researchers are still debating how much of this is causal versus correlated and how widely applicable specific techniques are. But the direction of the evidence is consistent. How you breathe shapes what your body can do. And most people living modern lives in modern buildings under modern stress are breathing in ways their ancient architecture was never designed for. Think about when chronic mouth breathing became common. It correlates with something anthropologists have been documenting in skull records for centuries. Before agriculture, before processed food, before the industrialization of diet, human jaws were wide. Wide enough to accommodate all the teeth without crowding. Wide enough to hold open nasal passages. Fossil records and archaeological skull samples consistently show that pre-agricultural humans had straight teeth, broad palates, and large, open airways. After the agricultural revolution, something changed. Softer food meant less jaw work. Less jaw work meant less bone stress during childhood development. Less bone stress meant narrower jaws, more crowded teeth, and compressed nasal passages. Anthropologist Daniel Lieberman at Harvard has written extensively about how the modern human skull, your skull, is meaningfully different from the skull of your ancestors. Not because of genetics, because of the food you chew, and when you started chewing it. A narrower jaw means a narrower palate. A narrower palate means a higher, more arched roof of the mouth. A higher roof means the floor of your nasal cavity is compressed. And compressed nasal anatomy means breathing through your nose is harder. So you breathe through your mouth instead. And your body, ancient and adaptive and doing its best, pays a quiet ongoing cost. None of this means you are broken. None of this is a verdict on you. Your body is doing what bodies do, surviving the environment you gave it, adapting to the pressures around it, compensating for shortfalls with whatever tools it has available. But there is something deeply strange about realizing that one of your most automatic functions, the one your brain handles without ever asking your permission, might have quietly drifted away from its original design. And there's something genuinely useful about knowing that the drift is not permanent. Breathing researchers across disciplines, from freediving to sleep medicine to performance physiology, now converge on a surprisingly simple set of observations. Slower is almost always better than faster. Nasal is almost always better than oral. Lower and deeper is almost always better than high and shallow. A breath rate of around 6 breaths per minute, far slower than the average adult's 12 to 20, appears across multiple studies to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, reduce cortisol, lower blood pressure, and improve heart rate variability. That last one is a measure of how flexibly your heart responds to demands. High variability is associated with resilience. Low variability is associated with stress, aging, and disease. 6 breaths per minute is not a magic number. It is a direction. It is the instruction your ancient body already knows. The next time you notice your breath, you probably will not think about ancient skulls or carbon dioxide chemistry or the Bohr effect. You will just notice you are breathing. But that noticing, that small moment where the automatic becomes visible, is exactly the kind of gap your ancestors never needed and you always have. You have been breathing your entire life. The question was never whether you could do it. The question is whether the body that crossed savannas and held its breath underwater and breathed itself to sleep in open air, whether that body would recognize what you are doing now. And whether, with almost no effort at all, you could give it back something closer to what it was always meant to have.